Welcome back. Of course, RadioFire.com. Yours truly, Diamond K, in here. And as I always say, election season upon us. Very important time. This is a very important election. And I have a special guest in here with me to talk about Baltimore, more specifically District 8. But hopefully we can talk some other things too. Please introduce yourself.
Councilman Kristerfer Burnett, District 8.
Absolutely.
Yep.
How are you doing?
Good day, man. It's a little dreary out.
Yeah.
Good day.
So I wanted you to come on and for a while, and our schedules didn't connect, but they finally connected, and I'm really happy about that. So I want to go back to the beginning for people that may or may not know. Where did you grow up?
Born and raised in Baltimore. I'm not in the West Side. I am third generation in the house that I'm in. My grandfather moved here in '67, and we just been handing it down. But yeah, in and around the city. Started on the East Side, moved out to Essex, Randallstown, and then after college, moved into Edmondson Village, where I've been for almost 10 years now.
What got you into politics?
Just feeling like we needed a community organizer on the council. Before running for office, don't come from any real political background at all. I was a campaign manager for now Senator McRae back in 2014, and that was really my first huge exposure to what it takes to run for office, what it's like to serve in office. I had a policy background academically and worked as an advocate for the Service Employees Union and worked on issues like local hiring, tried to intervene in the BG&E Exelon merger to preserve, the impact or try to mitigate the impact of rate increases on residents in Baltimore. Done some work in Annapolis around school funding, testified in City Hall around TIFs and pilots and fair development. And so that exposure just as a community advocate, served on the board of my community association, helped start a farmer's market, really sort of tested the waters a little bit. Wasn't a lifelong dream to ever run for office, but felt like I had a calling. And
saw the need.
Yeah, and saw the need. And felt like, I had the backing of the community and the blessing of the community to do it. And decided to take a leap in 2016 to see how things would shake out for me.
And it shook out well. And it also shook out well for the district. You were the right person for the job. You were the right person for the job. And I'm glad that you are in that seat. Now, before we talk about, let's go there. So this term, how has it been? You're on the other side of it, mm-hmm. and looking back at it, how has it been?
Man, it's been rough. We have a lot of challenges in Baltimore. And, from day one, I remember sitting in 2 weeks on the job in front of the school CEO, letting us know that we were going to be facing a $130 million budget shortfall in that coming school year, and that was January 2017. We've had 300 murders every year. Yeah. We've had 2 mayors, 2 council presidents, 4 police commissioners. I've had flooding in my district. I've had the fire 2 weeks ago at the Edmondson Village Shopping Center. It's been a lot. Opioid crisis is still an issue impacting us. And so I feel like it's very, very, very much a challenge.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming in with so many both, systemic issues that have been long-term when we talk about blight and vacancy and things like lead paint and addiction, things that have lack of economic opportunity for large swaths of the city, lack of investment in the east and west side of the city. Those are things I knew I was walking into that would require both a real long-term vision to solve and the need to take immediate steps to address. And so those are things I knew coming in the door. What I didn't know was, that we'd have large-scale scandals and be in the national media several times. And so those have
not for good things.
And not for good things, yeah. Right? And I love the city, man. And it's personal. I think for all of us as advocates, it's been personal for a long time for all people from Baltimore, from the city. And so that's been the driving force in staying strong and through that adversity and staying focused and an eye on the ball that, while we have these challenges that are immediately in front of us, that, we continue to take bold steps and to try and address those challenges. And I think ultimately, while it's been a very difficult job for the 2.5 years, just almost 3 I've been on there, I think we've passed some big bills that may not in the short run put a dent in the challenges that we have, but in the long term, I think we'll look back and say we got it right. And the immediately one that comes to mind to me is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which we passed, which came on the ballot in 2016 as Question J. And now we have a Affordable Housing Trust Fund that's going to be producing $20 million in that account that can only go to the development of affordable housing, community land trusts across the city of Baltimore. It's something that we don't really get talked about. It was a bill put in by Councilmember Bullock that I was one of the lead co-sponsors on and helped work on and work through.
Because that's not the sexy stuff.
Yeah, it's not the sexy stuff.
But it's important.
Yeah, complete streets ordinance. When we talk about how people move through the city and pedestrian safety. And I'm most proud of is the Fair Election Fund, which I got on the ballot in 2018, which was approved by 75% of the voters. And we just passed on third reader the ordinance that'll operationalize that. And that'll really have a transformative impact on how elections run in Baltimore City, the impact of big dollars have on shaping who wins and who runs for office. And it's a monumental piece of legislation that only 2 other municipalities have done in the state of Maryland. And very few across the country, but I've been getting emails from people all over the country, Detroit, Minneapolis, some small towns up in upstate New York. I mean, people all over the country have been watching the Fair Election Fund come to fruition, because I think ultimately where we talk about local races or national races, the influence of money in politics, I think we can all agree has been pretty problematic for a long time.
Definitely.
And that fund comes
on both sides of the aisle.
On both sides of the aisle. That's everybody, right?
Yes.
And we have all Democrats on the city council. So, it's not a partisan issue. It's actually one that would open the door up for, non-Democrats, I'd say, in the Baltimore context, because, most of our elected officials are Democrats. All of them are Democrats in the city delegation and on the council. But it would open the door for independents and third parties to have the same opportunities to raise money competitively and win local races. And I think it's important when we talk about, there's a lot of good people who run for office every cycle. But the biggest hurdle that almost all of them have is, how do I get my message out, right? Where do the T-shirts come from? Where do the yard signs come from? How do I get my website up? How do I buy radio ads? How do I send mail, right? All of these things are extremely expensive and often become the barrier for people not winning or not running. And it's an issue. And when we think about having a seat at the table with folks who have the best interest in the hand of the city of Baltimore, that shouldn't be the barrier. The good idea should be the reason you win.
Yeah, absolutely. And that barrier, like you're saying, can be the difference between what type of candidate we get.
Yep.
And an eventual elected person that we get. I wanna double back to something that you talked about. And we had a little bit of comments on this when it happened, and that was the fire in Edmondson Village. Mm-hmm. So from what you understand, what happened?
So we still don't know. I mean, as far as the cause, it's still under investigation. Okay. I've heard rumors swirling. That arson has come up a number of times.
Yeah.
And there may be some legs to that. I'll say that. But I've been checking. I actually just checked in with the fire chief 2 days ago. It's still under active investigation. We know that it burned so long because of a gas leak on the property. So it burned for almost 12 hours.
Yeah, that was so concerning to me because, of course, people that don't know the area, there's a fire station literally across the street. Mm-hmm. I was telling some people that they're out of town that the firemen and women could have gone to the end of the court and just turned the hose on, and I think that they could have hit some of the fire literally from the driveway. Mm-hmm. But when you have that kind of challenge, like you said, with the gas, that was
the challenge. It would have been out much sooner had it not been fueled by a natural gas line that ruptured. And that was really my biggest concern when I got on the scene was, knowing that the gas line was contributing to the intensity of the fire.
Yeah.
I was concerned that, it would impact the residents that live right behind it. And for a while, actually, there were shutoffs
Yes.
for gas and electric. And that was
Yes.
a safety precaution.
Yes.
We were concerned that the fire would travel through the gas line into people's houses. So they caught it quick, and we were able to shut that off. But, like I said, it was the safety issues with BG&E crews getting to it or why it burned so long. And I can tell you we're asking questions about that as well because, luckily nobody was harmed.
Right.
But, for me, it shouldn't take that long to
Right.
get access to a gas line.
Right.
The facility's old, and it's been there a long time, one of the first of its kind in the Northeast region. Of
Absolutely.
The country. But that's no reason why we shouldn't have investments in infrastructure from BG&E. We pay a significant amount of money on a monthly basis, and rates don't seem to ever go down.
No, they don't.
And so, we have pushed questions to them from my office around, why was that so difficult for you guys? And when we talk about rebuilding, which it will be rebuilt, we've been working with the owner, both with the city delegation, the 41st district, is looking at resources available from the state. And
because of course, people were concerned about, is this an attempt to get some of our people out of there? You know what I mean? I think that was something that concern that came up. But the farmers market that you started is right across the street.
So we didn't run this year.
You didn't run this
year? Yeah,
right.
We didn't run this year. One of the challenges that we had was keeping our actual farmers. All the other vendors are doing great, but we're a farmers market.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we saw was actually the nearby Giant started offering more fruits and vegetables. They're still not where they need to be, and I'll be the first to say that. But we actually our biggest competitor was the grocery store, and that was the reason we started it, was that they weren't offering what they needed to offer for what we felt the community needed.
So they felt pressure then.
They felt some pressure and ended up ultimately putting
that's
us
a
out
good
of
thing.
business.
Well, that may be
right?
a good thing.
Yeah,
that may be a good thing.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about something else that has been plaguing the city for a while,
Sure.
and I know there's something that you're involved in. That's the trafficking,
Mm-hmm.
the trafficking thing. Okay, so I see a lot of conflicting things online. Is there a white van that people are supposed to be looking for? I guess, school us on this.
Sure. So I don't like to make definitive statements because I know the second I do, there will be a white van that is involved in something, and I heard things on the street about people being abducted, and I don't want to minimize that. We know that that's true. We know it has been true for a long time that our communities have been targeted by traffickers. But having been working on this issue for a few years now, and speaking to survivors, speaking to organizations that help people who've been trafficked return to normalcy through resources, rehousing them, counseling, etc., I have not heard that.
Okay.
And, obviously you want people to be vigilant. And, so I've been trying to be careful about my responses to that because you want people that should be aware of their surroundings, right? But traffickers it's not usually the MO. Typically, most of the folks I've spoken to who've been trafficked have known their trafficker. Either they were a family member or what they perceive to be a boyfriend, or if they're a trusted adult, if they're children, or when we talk about the issue of labor trafficking, I mean that's going on in construction sites all over the city.
That's true.
And these are people who are their employers, right? So it's often a little more of a grooming that you see that occurs over a period of time where the trafficker tries to build trust and build that relationship with the victim, and before you know it, then they're being trafficked. And that's what we actually find is actually difficult to convince victims that they are such because they don't feel that they're actually being victimized,
right,
or may not identify as a trafficking victim until you really break it down for them that he or she gave you housing and the new phone and new hair and that kind of thing. And now there's an exchange that comes where you're expected to pay it back. And that's often being a commercial sex act. And we define human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, or coercion to get someone to commit a commercial sex act. Or we talk in the instance of labor trafficking, it may be withholding pay or holding documents over people's heads if they're an undocumented citizen, or literally locking them in basements. We have a lot of folks who are in indentured servitude. They may come over here and to do housework for the wealthy and end up trapped in those situations. So it's a little more complex. It's really
it's very complex.
It's not as simple as somebody just snatching you off.
And I'm glad that you said that, because that coercion piece, I think, is the part that's missing. Because sometimes people just think, I'm at the mall, and then some guy grabs them and throws them in a car, and that's the only way that it happens, or something, some variation of that. But there's that targeted piece and that slow process, that you're talking about, and that coercion part.
And they prey on vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And the reason it's an issue in Baltimore is that a lot of those vulnerabilities are connected to poverty, housing insecurity, food insecurity. We see some of the people who are more prone to be trafficked are homeless youth, particularly LGBTQ youth. Who may have a hard time finding foster homes or employers that are willing to hire them if they're transgender.
Right.
So those vulnerabilities that are structural issues in Baltimore are things that they take advantage of. And, so working on this issue is particularly difficult because while we've passed a number of pieces of legislation that I'm really proud of around the issue of human trafficking, ultimately we know that the real systemic issues of poverty are the things that drive trafficking in the first place. And those are the things that we have to hit at. And, those are a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more than just trying to raise the minimum wage.
Yeah.
We talk about our education system. We talk about opportunities for young people. And oftentimes they parallel the same challenges that we have with the drug trade, where a lot of your lower level dealers are taking all the risk. They're not making a whole lot of money, but they also feel like they don't have opportunity, and so they get involved in this thinking this is the only way I can really make money, and ultimately take the biggest risk to be killed or arrested, or pulling out a gun themselves, right, and driving that violence. And we see those parallels are very clear, and that really ultimately what we're talking about are a response to trying to get yourself out of poverty, trying to get yourself out of a terrible situation, and you feeling like this may be the only way you know how to do it.
Right. And so I'm glad that you're somebody who was on this issue relatively early, and you were one of the first people that I heard talking about it. And I'm not going to say that I ignored it, but when I heard you mention it initially, it wasn't on my radar as much as it is now. And I definitely were one of the first people that I heard really talking about this challenge, that the city is facing. Not just the city,
sure,
but
it's regional.
but
it's a big issue in Baltimore.
It really is.
Frankly, I had a constituent go missing, and her counselor, who at the time was a counselor at Western High School, came to me and said, "Councilman, you need to do something about this." And I didn't know anything about the issue.
Wow.
And had a huge learning curve. But I knew that young people were being affected, and I knew that vulnerable people were being affected. Our folks who were barely hanging on were the people who were most likely to be trafficked. And so for me, it was something that, to your point, none of my colleagues were talking about at the time on the council. And when we started the Baltimore City Human Trafficking Collaborative as a result, because we also saw that there was a lack of coordination and working in silos among agencies in Baltimore that were tasked with working on this. So we now have a 55-member collaborative that has been in operation for 2 years now. And actually next month will be our second year. One of the largest collaboratives in the state of Maryland, and been pretty effective in that time period. But we still have a tremendous amount of work to do.
So campaign season is here. Right?
Right back.
Right back. Have you started knocking on doors and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah.
So what responses are you getting from your constituents when they see you on the other side of the door?
So I've been on the TV a lot recently, so a whole lot of that. A lot of interviews. But
you've been doing a lot of that.
Yeah, but I feel pretty good. I mean, obviously you can't please everybody, but sure. Overwhelmingly a tremendous amount of support on the doors. People happy with my work, people knowing that I'm working hard. You know, obviously we have a ways to go to get the city where it needs to be at and the district where it needs to be at. But I don't think anybody questions my work ethic.
Yeah, you're out in the streets.
And that's what I've been hearing on the doors, man. It's very different this time though. Because when you're running
better or worse?
I'd say just different. I spend a lot more time talking to folks on doors. When you're running when I ran in 16, I was running for an open seat. So, you're talking about the things that you want to do. And this is kind of like checking your homework, right? So now you knock on doors, and they're meeting people that I met the last time, and they followed my work, and so now it's a more of an accountability session, which is good. I don't run from it, but people want to talk about the bills that I passed. They want to talk about the voting record. They want to talk about the things that I've gotten done in the district, or things that still need to happen. And it's also just drives my team crazy, because now, when you're knocking on doors the first time, people will say, when you get in, I need you to do something about this. When you're the council person knocking on the door, they're like, hold on, let me put my jacket on, and we're going to show you what's going on in the alley right now. And so I end up spending a lot more time, which is great. I love it, but more time than last time, where I'm, actually working while I'm doing the job. And I'd say that's been a challenge in some ways, because you want to cover as much ground as you can. Obviously, when you're running, you got, we have 43,000 constituents in District 8, trying to get to every single one of those doors.
Difficult.
But it's a lot more difficult when, people want a little bit more of your time than they did before. Which is a good thing. The fact that people recognize me, the fact that people know the work and they've been following it and feel engaged is a good thing. And hopefully it'll result in, me being reelected. I don't take anything for granted, which is why, we were out knocking doors in the cold. We're going to keep pushing through until April 28th.
That's good. And you mentioned that you are someone who's out in the public, as far as you're on the screens. When issues happen, a lot of times I see you there talking, and the media talks to you. I've frequently, when I've talked to other politicians, I've said that we're at a point, we're at a break in the road, where I think that things are going to from the old guard to the new guard. And you were part of that new wave coming in, the younger candidates coming in. Have you gotten resistance from some of our legacy politicians, specifically in, other council people?
Yeah, I mean, it's coming in, especially as a freshman with a large freshman class. I mean, you get some rubber in the road. I mean, because, everybody feels like ultimately the way that their vision for the city is the way is going to make it better, right? And we all, and I ultimately believe that. Even with my colleagues that I disagree with, there is a generational shift, I think, that's happening at the local level and the state level. And we've seen some huge institutional elected officials who've been there a long time,
absolutely,
lose elections or retire, and younger people stepping up. But with that does come some friction, because they feel confident about their legacy too and their resume, right? And you not come in as a young gun thinking, well, questioning that sometimes, like, why have we been doing it this way? And I think, but ultimately, what we're seeing though is and regardless of whether it's politics or any other field, that when you have new people coming in, they're going to question, the direction that the city's going, or the direction that business is going. And you can't take that personal, right? You can't take that, because you passed that bill 20 years ago doesn't mean that we shouldn't look back at it again and say, well, how is the thing shaking out a little bit? Maybe we need to tweak this a little bit. And I've heard that from agencies that they're, especially early on when we came in, that we were asking questions that hadn't been asked in 10, 15 years, and really pushing them to rethink how they've done their operations, whether that's trash pickup or mowing or dealing with illegal dumping or police overtime or, the civilianization of the department. A lot of these processes, we've been shaking it up. And a lot of it's just been, well, why are we doing this way? And, when you have folks who've been there a very long time, things become normalized. And I'm not, I don't want to take jabs at them, but things that, and I even find myself with that, right? Where, some things you got to continue to remind yourself, like, this isn't okay, or maybe we need to look a little deeper here. And the
answer is, this is the way we've always done it. That's not okay. A good answer.
That's not going to cut it anymore. And I think, we're regardless of how things shape up in the cycle, in 2 elections in the city council, we would have had 12 new council members, because between retirements and people moving on, running for higher office, 12 out of 15 at a minimum, right? And that's assuming that the 3 of us that came in 16 come back. Again, don't take anything for granted, right? Work hard. But, that's a big shift in leadership, and a huge learning curve. But I think it's ultimately be good for the city. It'll be good for the state. And I'm excited about the coming cycle, right? To see, continue that injection of new blood and new leadership stepping up.
And I think that reflects society, because people are moving. In my family, we talk about people moving to that next step, and then my parents are becoming the oldest people in my family, and then I move into the spot that they were in, and it's like that in society, and I think that government is going through that shift right now. So I definitely would love to have you come back again sometime. How can people support your campaign and all that you have going on?
ChrisBurnett.com is the best way. They can donate. They can sign up to volunteer. We'll be adding more platform pieces as we get closer to the election cycle,
Sure.
so they can follow what I stand for, what my voting record is, and I want to be transparent about that, right? I mean, this is, like I said, this is a homework time, right? We come in to check in. What have you done well? What are some things you can do better? They can follow me on social media. I'm on all the big main platforms, Instagram.
And you're active on social media.
Oh yeah, I try to post everything that I'm doing, things that are happening in City Hall, hearings that are coming up. I was newly appointed as the chair of the Health Committee, and so we've been doing monthly hearings, and actually going to be ramping that up in 2020 to have 3 to 4 per month to look at the social determinants of health and things that are really impacting Baltimore from a health perspective. Happy to come back on and talk about some of that.
Absolutely.
But I try to be as accessible as possible. People can reach out to me, and anytime I will meet with anybody, we can sit down and talk, hash it out, and hear their vision for Baltimore. I mentioned the human trafficking, but there's been other bills that I've put in that have come from either knocking on doors, meeting people at community meetings, and just ideas that have come from residents that I think are important, that they reach out to us and say, look, have you heard of this thing? Because don't assume that we know everything as electeds, right? We're still learning and growing, and we also have our own individual areas of expertise that we lean on, but there's some things that I've stepped out on, like human trafficking and fair elections, that have come from just looking at challenges and listening to the community and then building policy from that.
And that's lastly, that's something that does not happen a lot. A lot of times the constituents are not used to the accessibility piece.
Yep.
And I see online communication, and sometimes you'll jump in and say, hey, wait, no, it's this or it's that. And I think that those type of things, don't stop doing those type of things, because a lot of politicians don't do that. They're not really paying attention. And when people see that and see that, you're paying attention to what's being said and you're interjecting and educating as it goes on, that type of attentiveness goes a long way.
I appreciate it.
It does.
Yeah.
So definitely thank you again for coming by. Much continued success and everything you have going on, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, radioandfire.com. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back.